Okay, Marcus Riddicker pours through the evidence to find out. If you became a merchant or Navy sailor then, plucked from the docks of London's East End, young and hungry, you ended up in a floating wooden hell. You worked all hours on a cramped, half-starved ship, and if you slacked off for a second, the all-powerful captain would whip you with the cat-o'-nine tails. If you slacked consistently, you could be thrown overboard. At the end of months or years of this, you were often cheated out of your wages. Pirates were the first people to rebel against this world. They mutinied against their tyrannical captains and created a different way of working on the seas. Once they had a ship, the pirates elected their captains and made all their decisions collectively. They shared their bounty out in what Riddicker calls, quote, one of the most egalitarian plans for the disposition of resources to be found anywhere in the 18th century, end quote. They even took in escaped African slaves and lived with them as equals. The pirates showed quite clearly and subversively that ships do not have to be run in the brutal and oppressive ways of the merchant service and the Royal Navy. This is why they were popular, despite being unproductive thieves. The words of one pirate of that lost age, a young British man called William Scott, should echo into this new age of piracy. Just before he was hanged in Charleston, South Carolina, he said, quote, "What I did was to keep me from perishing. I was forced to go a-pirating to live," end quote. And then they hung him. In 1991, moving forward a couple hundred years, in 1991, the government of Somalia in the Horn of Africa collapsed. Its 9 million people have been teetering on starvation ever since, and many of the ugliest forces in the Western world have seen this as a great opportunity to steal the country's food supply and dump our nuclear waste into their seas. Yes, nuclear waste. As soon as the government was gone, mysterious European ships started appearing off the coast of Somalia, dumping vast barrels into the ocean. The coastal population began to sicken. At first, they suffered strange rashes, nausea, malformed babies. Then, after the 2005 tsunami, hundreds of the dumped and leaking barrels washed up on shore. People began to suffer from radiation sickness. More than 300 died. Ameldu Old Abdullah, I guess is his name, the UN envoy to Somalia, tells me, quote, "Somebody is dumping nuclear material here. There's also lead and heavy metals such as cadmium, mercury, you name it," end quote. Much of it can be traced back to European hospitals and factories who seem to be passing it on to the Italian mafia to dispose of cheaply. When I asked Abdullah what European governments were doing it, he said with a sigh, or what the European governments were doing about it, there we go. He said with a sigh, "Nothing. There has been no cleanup, no compensation, no prevention," end quote. At the same time, other European ships have been looting Somalia's seas of their greatest resource, seafood. We've destroyed our own fish stocks by overexploitation. Now we move on to theirs. More than $300 million worth of tuna, shrimp, lobster, and other sea life is being stolen every year by vast trawlers illegally sailing into Somalia's unprotected seas. The local fishermen have suddenly lost their livelihoods and they're starving. Mohammed Hussein, a fisherman in the town of Marka, 100 kilometers south of Mogadishu, told Reuters, quote, "If nothing is done, there soon won't be much fish left in our coastal waters," end quote. This is the context in which the men we are now calling pirates have emerged. Everyone agrees they were ordinary Somalian fishermen who at first took speedboats to try to dissuade the dumpers and trawlers, or at least wage attacks on them. They call themselves the Volunteer Coast Guard of Somalia, and it's not hard to see why. In a surreal telephone interview, one of the pirate leaders, Suguli Ali, said their motive was, quote, "to stop illegal fishing and dumping in our waters. We don't consider ourselves sea bandits. We consider the sea bandits to be those who illegally fish and dump in our seas and dump waste in our seas and carry weapons in our seas," end quote. William Scott would understand those words. No, this doesn't make hostage-taking justifiable. And yes, some are clearly just gangsters, especially those who have held up World Food Program supplies. But the pirates have been the overwhelming support of the local population for a reason. The independent Somalian news website, Wardher News, conducted the best research we have into what ordinary Somalis are thinking, and it found 70%, quote, strongly supported the piracy as a form of national defense of the country's territorial waters, end quote. During the Revolutionary War in America, George Washington and America's founding fathers paid pirates to protect America's territorial waters because they had no navy or coast guard of their own. Most Americans supported them. Is this so different? Did we expect starving Somalians to stand passively on their beaches, paddling in our nuclear waste, and watch us snatch their fish to eat in restaurants in London and Paris and Rome? We didn't act on those crimes. But when some of the fishermen responded by disrupting the transit corridor for 20% of the world's oil supply, we began to shriek about evil. If we really want to deal with piracy, we need to stop its root cause, our crimes, before we send in the gunboats to root out Somalia's criminals. The story of the 2009 war on piracy was best summarized by another pirate who lived and died in the 4th century BC. He was captured and brought to Alexander the Great, who demanded to know, quote, what he meant by keeping possession of the sea, end quote. The pirate smiled and responded, quote, what you mean by seizing the whole earth, but because I do it with a petty ship, I'm called a robber, while you, who do it with a great fleet, are called emperor. End quote. Once again, our greatest imperial fleets are sailing today. But who's the robber? Now, this was written by Johan Hari, a writer for the Independent newspaper. He's reported from Iraq, Israel, Palestine, the Congo, the Central African Republic, Venezuela, Peru, and the U.S., and his journalism has appeared in publications all over the world. Now, there's a postscript to this story, and the postscript came from the most recent posting of the story, and it says, some commentators seem bemused by the fact that both toxic dumping and the theft of fish are happening in the same place. Wouldn't this make fishing contaminated? In fact, Somalia's coastline is vast, stretching over 2,000 miles. Imagine how easy it would be, without any Coast Guard or Army, to steal fish from Florida and dump nuclear waste on California.
You're listening to the best in alternative talk radio, AVR, the American Voice Radio Network. Listen online at theamericanvoice.com. We're on KU band satellite, Galaxy 25, transponder 5, frequency 11836. And remember, AVR's free for all anti-New World Order Saturdays.